I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison. Headliners is up next, but first, here's the latest news. Offenders who commit antisocial behaviour could be forced to clean up their communities as part of the Prime Minister's new immediate justice scheme. Under the plans set to be announced on Monday, those who spray graffiti or commit vandalism would be forced to make good the damage within 48 hours. Other punishments could include picking up litter, washing police cars or doing unpaid work in shops, all while wearing jumpsuits or high-vis jackets. Rishi Sunak says he hopes to crack down on offences which erode a community's sense of safety. Matt Hancock and Kwasi Kwarteng have been caught up in a sting operation, quoting thousands of pounds to consult for a non-existent company. The two former cabinet ministers were approached by a fake South Korean firm set up by Campaign Group led by donkeys. Paid a similar amount each month. MPs are allowed to seek employment outside of Parliament, and there is no accusation of any wrongdoing. In total, 5 MPs took part in the interviews. The Prime Minister has been accused of using incorrect figures when discussing the asylum claims backlog. The UK Statistics Authority has written to the government saying numbers used by Rishi Sunak do not reflect official stats. It's wrong, they say, to claim that the Conservatives have halved the number of people waiting for their asylum applications to be processed, when the backlog has increased by 150,000 people since they took office. Post office workers have been offered a 9% pay rise following a series of strikes. Members of the Communication Workers Union who work at Crown post offices have also been offered substantial lump sum payments of between £2,000 and £3,000. They'll also see an increase in paternity pay, and they'll now be balloted on the deal, with the union saying it's the best that can be achieved. And Russia wants to station nuclear weapons in Belarus, according to the country's state media. President Putin says he's struck a deal to post tactical nuclear weapons within the country which borders Ukraine. He claims it's not a violation of nuclear non-proliferation agreements, comparing it with the United States stationing nuclear weapons on the territory of its European allies. We're on TV, online, DAB+ radio, and of course on TuneIn. This is GB News. Time now for headliners.
Hello, I'm Stephen Allen and welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight to take you through the best of Sunday's news stories, the best headliners duo, Leo Kearse and Lewis Schaefer. And doing well both in a score out of 5. What would you rate yourself so far?
Out of 5, that's an interesting one. Don't normally rate like how you're doing out of 5. It's normally a 10.
I think it makes it quicker. Make it out of 5, like a hygiene rating.
Well, 3, but I mean, it could be a high 3.
Lewis?
I'm like a -1.
Yeah, that's about right. If it wasn't going to be a negative number, somehow it would have been a complex number with you. There's no way it was going to be straight down the middle.
Do you know what? Because it's like these questions, how am I doing? You should never ask anybody how they're doing. I just think...
Do you not realise everyone asks everyone how they're doing, and the key is to not care about the answer. It's just a polite thing. How are you today? No one's ever asked you that and really meant it, Lewis.
Yeah, but I know that. But I know that I respect the question, and I respect the questioner.
I'm sure that'll continue. Let's move into today's front pages, tomorrow's front pages. The Sunday Mail says, Rishi, I will let the victim say how to punish Yobs. Sunday Telegraph says European judges may be overruled on Rwanda deportations. Observer, top Tory MPs ask for £10,000 a day to work for a fake company. Sunday Express, Rishi crime blitz to woo Red Wall. Sunday Times, strip searchers of children as young as 8. And finally, the Daily Star Sunday. There's a guy who works down the chip shops where he's E.T. And those were your front pages. Right, let's kick off with the gotcha moment of the day from The Observer, Leo.
Yes, the Observer's saying they've got this gotcha. So they contacted, or led by donkeys, this pressure group contacted Tory MPs and asked them to work for this fake Korean company that they'd set up. And, you know, filmed the interviews that were done over Zoom or whatever. They asked Kwasi Kwarteng, Matt Hancock, a couple of other people, and offered them like 10 grand a day to work for this company, and they said yes. And they're like, gotcha. It's like, no, you offered them 10. Who's going to turn down 10 grand a day? Obviously, people are going to say, yeah, I'll take the 10 grand. Anybody. You think the Guardian journalist writing this would turn down 10 grand a day? That's more than a Guardian journalist earns in a year.
Do we not hope for better, though, than the people who are meant to be busy running the country? This is not just like, oh, this is allowed in the rules. Maybe the rules should be changed so that you can't go and earn loads of other money when you should be running.
We can't have successful politicians who are wanted by the private sector.
It's not mutually exclusive.
Who can, like, be paid loads of money. Obviously, if they're getting paid loads of money, then you know, they're worth the money. I think if you're going to offer somebody 10 grand, they're going to take the 10 grand. Nobody's that much of an idiot. And also, they did have to go to South Korea for this money. I mean, some that showed that politicians are easier to trick was the Hancock affair, where Isabel Oakeshott said, I'll write your biography for you, and he was like, oh sure, here's all my WhatsApps, and then she was like, well, I'm just going to send these off to everybody.
Yeah. Lewis, your take on this?
My take on it is like I was first of all, I wasn't shocked, because in this country it's totally bought and paid for. The fact that they allow the guy, that this is totally legal, right, number one. Number two was this Kwasi Kwarteng. He was asked, how much would you charge this fake company to do the bidding in Parliament? And he said, £10,000 a month. And the fake company said, oh, we were planning on paying you £8,000 to £12,000 a day.
Yeah.
A day. So this Kwasi Kwarteng is the worst negotiator in the history of the world. It's a good job
he was never in charge of money, or anything. That would really make things go bad. Yeah.
I mean, he didn't really smell the scandal scam coming. Surely if you say, I'll do it for this amount of money, and they're like, no, we want to give you like 12 grand a day, that's a sign that it's not, you know, it's not real.
But you not think there could be an argument about the system that it's not about not having successful people being politicians, but while you're a politician, for that little bit of term, maybe pay politicians more, but say, could you focus on the job of being a politician a bit?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, we don't want everybody to be some sort of career politician, just this government apparatchik who's never experienced anything outside the world of politics. I think it's great that people from business and from finance want to go into politics and actually, you know, do some good for the country as well. I'm trying not to laugh there, but
it's going so well. But
even I stopped believing in that.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair play. Let's move on to the Mail on Sunday, Leo.
Well, this is Rishi. I will let Victor say how to publish jobs. And, I mean, this is an old concept, the idea that you're going to ask the person who's been wronged what the punishment should be. But you can't. First of all, you can't let normal people decide what the punishment is. It's like asking a child what punishment should be. It's always the death penalty. It's never something like, oh, well, maybe he should be in jail for a month. Or
and
something.
not a straightforward death either. This is going to be like drowned in sludge.
For what he did to me, he's a horrible, horrible human being. It sounds. This is what Rishi. This is how, because Rishi's thinking. I want to win people over. He has no understanding of human nature. Really.
Well, Keir Starmer is also doing the same thing. They're both, because there's an election coming up, they're both trying to look tough on crime before one of them gets in and then inevitably does nothing about crime. Yeah. But Keir Starmer said Labour would also prioritise fighting the virus that is antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, off-road biking in rural areas, and drugs. Now, fly tipping and drugs, yeah, all right, they're a serious problem. Off-road biking in rural areas, that sounds very specific. Yeah. Has somebody been like off-road biking in Keir Starmer's garden?
It's definitely, he's got a problem with it, and he's adding it to the list up there with drugs.
Right.
Yeah, unless they're doing drugs in rural areas, right? Right where he's trying to go off-road.
It's like when they came up with like these countries, like evil countries in the world, and it's always like the worst ones, and then they include some other one to make it seem like they weren't being racist. You know, just it was like all the whatever it is.
But I mean, so is this just an appeal to I don't know how to say this, to the kind of people who love the idea of the phrase, well, I'd say hanging's too good for them.
People like me?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that
I don't know how to describe you, but yeah, because you can't really just let at your worst moment in life, when you are the most emotional because you've just been wronged, that's not the time for you to be picking punishments, is it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the punishments are capped, but it provides some sort of power and accountability and satisfaction to the person, to the victim, and sort of provides that bit of. I think it links, instead of just sending somebody away to a borstal or a jail or whatever, making them, tidy up the local area, it makes it visible, and people driving past in the local area will be like, oh, that's Susan's kid. So it provides that sort of that shame that I think is actually much more powerful than we think.
But I think they're doing that already. I have a friend of mine who was on community service or whatever it was called. They made him wear a yellow thing around town. So they are doing this. But the thing that shocked me was also that within 2 days they're going to have to clean the mess up, which means the person's been put on trial in less than 2 days. Only, this is... what kind of country is this that, doesn't even give a chance for the guy to, make a case of
Well, yeah, but they're not getting sent to, Gulag for 20 years. They're just going to have to pick up some litter.
Yeah, but to organise, to make the guy pick up the litter...
Also, this is a politician's pledge. It's not actually going to happen.
There's no way it's going to happen, is it? One of them on the list was about making people clean police cars. The amount of scratching is just going to be a nightmare. It's going to cost more in paintwork. Unbelievable. Next up is the Sunday Telegraph, Leo. What are they going with?
So European judges may be overruled on Rwanda deportations. So in an attempt to quell what could be the biggest rebellion of Rishi Sunak's premiership, ministers may agree to block the use of a controversial mechanism used by the European Court of Human Rights stop the flights to Rwanda taking off last June. So remember when the Rwanda flights were announced, and the first one was commissioned, and it was going to take off and take people and start providing some sort of deterrent to people coming across the channel. And then at the last moment, the European Court of Human Rights stepped in and said, no, you can't do this. But that was quite a controversial thing for the ECHR to do. So now people are saying that this is controversial for us to step in and provide limitations, but it sounds like it sounds like something that actually has to happen. Other countries in the EU have stricter rules on asylum and immigration than the UK does, and that's why people want to come to the UK. You come to the UK, get a 4-star hotel. It's nice. Other countries, it's not as nice. So we need to sort of make it a bit sort of tougher. But high migration is going to happen. The government's got a target of a net migration figure of 245,000 by 2027, which a lot of voters, more than half of voters, think is too high. But it's going to happen. Politicians love migration. It basically stimulates the economy, and they don't care about anything else.
Yeah.
It's not that politicians like migration. It's the richest people in the country benefit from migration.
Yeah.
You benefit. The average person. That's why it always kills me when I hear like working class people are pro-immigration, or the Labour Party, which should care about people, but they don't care about people. Migration hurts the countries that they come from because it's a drain on those countries, and it hurts the countries that they move to. Not everybody in the country. You can get your house painted for £50.
Yeah.
But the poorest people.
But if you're a painter, and suddenly you've got to compete against an unlimited supply of labour coming across the channel, it's impossible. You're not going to, if you've got a house, a wife, 2 cars, kids, and all the rest of it to pay for, you're not going to be able to put your rates as low as 3 guys living in a room.
I'm going to say this to Leo, because you happen to be right. But I'm going to say you're wrong, because people will listen to that and say, you really don't care about people.
Can we just check? So you're saying when you left America, it was a drain from America, was it?
Oh, you bet it was. Comedy died in America. There has been no good comedy in America.
Correlation doesn't imply causation.
And tremendous growth in comedy in this country.
But he's been an incredible drain on the public resources here with his health issues that he wasn't able to resolve until he went on an all-meat diet.
Yeah. And finally, Lewis, we think that this is going to... You can have a go at this.
Well, I just saw the headline, so I know nothing about this story. There's a guy that works down in the chip shop, swears he's E.T. It's based on... The headline comes from that fantastic song, which is Kirsty MacColl?
Yeah.
Kirsty MacColl, a fantastic song, and the punchline is, he's a liar, and I'm not sure about you. And so this guy thinks he's E.T. I mean, why it's in the front of the Daily Star, where there are other more...
If it's true,
yeah,
this is a bigger story than the rest that we've talked about.
Yeah.
We've just been talking about, various policies. If aliens are living here based on the DNA that aliens have collected so they can grow aliens to look like humans, it would be the biggest story.
No, it wouldn't be, because this guy would be a complete idiot for working at a chip shop. If you had come all that way and created this whole thing, why would you work? I mean, you can understand if he's working in TikTok, that would be...
It sounds the same as well, Chip Shop.
Chip Shop.
Maybe Scotland will bring out a social media app called Chip Shop. All the pictures are deep fried. Sorry.
I just realised you're effectively saying that these aliens leaving their home planets to travel all the way here are a drain on that planet. They are probably some of the brightest and best that those planets have to offer.
Yeah.
And they're turning up into the southern states.
I don't know whether this is true, what I said. I know a guy once told it to me, like maybe 15 years ago, and it made tremendous sense.
Yeah.
Tremendous sense. And you go to those places in Mexico, which has been completely drained of all the men of these towns, and they're just women and children and barely anybody there. And these whole communities, huge areas of Mexico, are completely dead zones. Like, not even like crime, they're just dead. And the women are lonely, and the children have no fathers.
Is that why you went there? Coming up, police evading scrutiny, Liz Truss under scrutiny, and the gender wars finally come to an end.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Stephen Allen. I'm still with Leo Kearse and Lewis Schaefer, the Mail on Sunday, Lewis. And Liz Truss, the George Lazenby of PMs, is a woman of honour.
That is an obscure reference, and I even understand it. It says the former Prime Minister Liz Truss, she nominates 4 close supporters for peerages as part of resignation honors, sparking outrage among opposition MPs. I didn't know you could do this. She was in office for like 49 days or something. She was like no time. And she thinks she's going to nominate people who helped her in her career. She's like nobody. It's like somebody staying in a hotel and thinking they can steal the towels.
Well, she wasn't just Prime Minister. She did some other stuff as well. Like
Yeah.
she was Defence Minister and stuff like that. Probably she's probably in other jobs.
She's doing all the trade negotiations, the post-Brexit.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, she did all that.
But she's not paid a salary for that. It's like the NHS, when we're applauding the NHS, like they're not paid. She was paid. Why does she get...
But I don't know, I think the people she's chosen are actually really good, because she's somebody in the Tory party who actually thinks like a genuine Tory, a small government, low-tax Tory, which is what the Tories used to be. And now they're not. Now they're just the Labour Party, but they've got a slightly different name. So it's nonsense. The outrage, people are like, it's outrageous that she gets to nominate people for peerages or whatever, despite only being in power for 49 days. The outrage is that she was only in power for 49 days. She was elected by Tory party members, and she was deposed by the blob that controls everything, the anti-democratic blob. So that's the real outrage.
If you're in favour of small government, why nominate people to the House of Lords? Effectively still ruling over us. She's making the group of people who rule over us even bigger.
Don't try and catch me out with your magic.
You're right about that, because the House of Lords, I think there are hundreds extra. There are not enough seats in the entire room for the House of Lords.
And that's a shame, because a lot of them need to sit down.
Yeah, they do need to sit down. They're so old and useless. At the end of the day, I don't understand your I'm going to say it. I understand the British political system. It's the worst thing about this country.
It's the one that America modelled its system
on. No, it did not.
It
was the American system is the anti-system, is the anti-this system, this House of Lords and this whole patronage business and everything.
But it's one of those things that, like, even though it sounds like it shouldn't work, it just does work somehow. And it sort of works better than having elected representatives. The House of Lords works better having, peerages.
Better.
It works better.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't. You don't get some, new fad coming in. They're all gender ideologists or something. They all want to impose some new thing. There's a check and a balance on.
America is all checks and all balances. It's made for checks and balances.
Well for you. But the longevity is the problem here as well, because some people would say you get the gig for 49 days because she did other things, but that's not the reason she gets to make a resignation honours suggestion list. You get the gig for 49 days, and then you put people in the House of Lords forever or until they die.
Yeah.
So
on average, about 6 years.
Yeah, which really is that how?
I don't know. It's like going to the Somme.
She's nominating younger people than the average, though. I would imagine that's an unreasonable level of power that you get from only having the gig for a short time.
But I think the House of Lords needs these people, so Mark Littlewood, I think he's the head of the IEA, basically a think tank that does sort of small government, low tax ideas, and that's what we need in government. Not just now, forever, because government just gradually gets bigger and more cumbersome and sucks in more of GDP.
But that's what you think they need.
No, it does.
I know you think it does, but somebody who's from the left does not think that.
No, but that's because the left are essentially communists.
Yeah,
the Tory party
they are.
They're essentially drifting into communism as well.
You're saying communists are really communists. Of course they're communists.
Let's move on to the Mail on Sunday, Leo. See what we do with this one. The test of a woman is to look down under.
Right, yeah. Well, that would be something that would solve a lot of problems in this day and age. But the women's rights campaigner, Posey Parker, is down in Australia from the eye. She's in the eye of the storm of trans culture war down under. That's a lot of words put together that don't really form a sentence. But yeah, she's basically down there. She's raising awareness of the sort of gender woo-woo cult that wants to transition children and put biological males in women's sport and put biological male rapists in women's prisons. And she's had threats to her safety. So she's got 7 bodyguards, and she's been called a Nazi because obviously. The trouble is, whenever you do something like this, you're going to attract a few nutters. And it happens on the left, you get, the Piers Corbyns and whoever coming along, and it happens on the right as well. So some people have come along and done, Nazi salutes, but, you occasionally get that at football matches. We don't say, we're going to ban football. We just recognise that sometimes nutters turn up to events. So she's been unfairly lumped in with these Nazis. And also, it's got to the stage that New Zealand television actually blurred out her hand. She was playing with her zip while they were interviewing her. And so her hand went like that. And they said it was a far-right white supremacist hate symbol because she was doing that, which is like the OK symbol. But apparently it's a far-right symbol. But, I mean, it's not. It's just somebody playing with their zip.
That's not the main part of the story, is it? Somehow we've ended up on zips. So, yeah, it's the violence of the protest against her as well has happened. Yeah. Lewis, get us back in the middle. How do we get two disparate groups who seem to think the worst of each other to actually come to some form of peace? Or are we never going to get that in this culture war?
I don't think we will, because we're in the midst of a war. In the midst of a war, you can't be all touchy-feely. I'm shocked that New Zealand and Australia actually had her come there. Okay, because I know she had a reputation of being like, in their mind, a horrible person. You say Corbyn is like an oddball, but he isn't an oddball. He represents Piers Corbyn. Not Piers Corbyn, the other Corbyn. Which one?
I was talking about Piers Corbyn.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, the other one's not much better.
I mean, how can people get back together again? This is one of those issues that people see things totally different. And I think it's like whether you see a duck or do you see a fish? Is that one of those etch-a drawings?
Oh yeah, like a rabbit or a...
Whatever those drawings are, where you can either see one or the other.
Yeah.
But you can't see them at the same time.
Yeah. Is there a part of the effect, like the echo chamber-ness of it, that you end up thinking the worst of the group that you disagree with? Instead of thinking, oh, they have some issues that we could clarify, the echo chamber lets you believe they hate everything about this side. And both sides think that, so there's no way that they'll ever have any sort of useful discussion. That's why the protests are met with other violent protests. That's why things kick off, right, instead of actually being useful.
Here's why things kicked off in this situation. Because it involves men. Trans women who originally started as men, they have residual high testosterone. They're men. They're crazy. So of course, and this is why it's kind of been called an anti-woman event. But it isn't an anti-woman event. It's just men being men. It's like what's happened in France with the riots in France. It's mostly men who do these kind of manly.
Well, in Scotland as well, I've seen, trans activists. The trouble is, the trans activist side, I can understand from an ideological point of view. Oh, it'd be great if, people who identify as a woman can, have access to all these spaces. But then you've got people who are maliciously abusing the system to gain access to the spaces for bad reasons, such as Isla Graham, the male rapist who was sent to a female prison in Scotland. You can't have this ideologically pure solution. It's a nonsense.
So you need to have a system that then works out how to stop the bad actors, which is why you need to talk rather than just hate the other side.
No, you just need like I've got an easy system, a hotness rule. If you're hot enough, if you're convincing enough, then yeah, you can go into the female prisons.
Would they just send you the photos, or would you have
probably
to
stand at the door?
Oh.
I assume the prison's got a door.
I mean, it's good. Everyone needs a hobby, but I'm not sure you'll get away with it. Sunday's Telegraph now, Lewis, and they're saying that this gender war is actually pretty much over. I guess we did solve it.
Yeah, that's according to the Telegraph. The week the tide turned in the gender war, and they use 4 examples, is that the transgender men have been... Well, transgender women, men who were once men and now they're women, have been banned from playing in international sports in the Olympics.
Or banned competing in the female category.
In the female category, right. So because there's only 2 categories, they're basically left to do with the men thing, which could be quite interesting to see, like, really hot chicks with those men.
You're making such a good point there, aren't you?
Yeah, and then the other things that they use is, say, Nicola Sturgeon has had some problems with her Gender Recognition Act. The Tavistock Clinic has closed. That Isle of Man situation, which I think you've spoken about, how the drag queen who was teaching pupils who were like 11 years old about 73 genders, that they had to cancel the entire program because of this. And the fact that Keir Starmer is hemming and hawing about what he's going to call men and women.
Yeah, he's still waiting to see what most people think a woman is before he says what he thinks a woman is. It's like, man, just say it. Just have an idea of what a woman is and stick to it. Nobody wants a leader who can't make up his mind on what a woman is.
But the Telegraph is saying because he's hemming and he's hawing, that's a sign that that side is losing.
Yeah. Well, the article makes the good point that for decades we had, all this progress in LGBTQ rights, civil rights, women's rights, and it was all, it was mostly good progress that everybody could get behind. But now we've reached the point where a lot of the progress is like, whoa, wait a minute, it's actually right to push back on it. So the people pushing back aren't intolerant, fascist, far-right bigots. They're just people with common sense who don't want children to be sterilised and maimed, don't want, rapists being sent into women's spaces, things like that seem fairly obvious to be, good ideas.
Well, excellent for that section. Coming up, the downside to slimming jabs, why hippies won't be happy anymore, and why the RAF thought women were too hysterical.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. Sunday's Telegraph Lewis, and some people, when they think of Donald Trump, think of the word cult or thereabouts.
Yes, but I think they're looking for something to pin on Donald Trump. And they always, something to pin. They just hate Donald Trump. And the cult thing that you mentioned is that Donald Trump was criticized for choosing Waco, Texas, for his first 2024 campaign rally, according to the Telegraph. And for those who don't know what Waco is, it's the site where the federal government killed 86 people breaking into an organization that was living there, I think, relatively peacefully, but refused to give up.
A religious sect.
A religious sect. And I think it was the federal, I don't think, it might not have been this. I think it was actually a brilliant place to hold an event because it's equidistant from Houston, Austin, and Dallas-Fort Worth, right in the middle of Texas.
Yeah.
It sounds like, and it's a very touristic place. It's a home of the Dr. Pepper Museum. Did you know that?
No way. They can't have the strapline, what's the worst that can happen, in Waco.
Is visiting the Dr. Pepper. Was that the thing? I don't know. Okay. And also there was a mammoth museum there, which is where there were bones of dead elephants. Elephants are Republicans. So, I thought that was,
some of the criticisms, so they say the critics are saying, oh, Trump's chosen this location because it appeals to extremists who view the raid on Waco as a seminal moment of government overreach. Surely killing 86 innocent civilians is a bit of a government overreach. You know what I mean? I think just, you know, getting fined for, you know, leaving my car on a yellow line is government overreach. But killing, like, entire families and stuff, that's definitely government overreach.
Do you not think there's a sense that maybe they thought, Donald Trump or his people thought, if you pick there, you'll definitely get in the news?
Yeah.
I think Donald Trump, because I thought about this, and I think Donald Trump is such a genius, he didn't even need to think it. It was like, he said, I've never even heard of Waco, Texas. It just comes out. He is the greatest he is the Johnny Rotten of his milieu.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, yeah.
I mean, for Johnny Rotten, what Johnny Rotten was to punk music was to music, basically putting a sledgehammer to this. I don't know whether that's
because he picks strange places. Remember, he picked that carpet warehouse or something. It sounded like it had the name similar to the hotel,
the Four Seasons.
No, that wasn't him. That was Giuliani, I think.
Let's move on to Sunday's Observer, Leo. And paying your pound of flesh could get a lot easier.
So the rise of slimming jabs could lead to overseas trips to remove excess skin, UK surgeons have warned. So you've got these miracle jabs that mean, you know, you can just inject them and then you just magically lose weight. They make you less hungry. I don't know how they work. It's probably going to, you know, lead you to develop excess earlobes in 20 years. But who cares? You're not going to be fat until then. But it's also, when you lose the flab, you're left with all the skin that previously held the flab in. And apparently this can cause problems. You get infections in all your little folds. You've got to wash yourself with a rag and a stick like you're still fat. And the surgeons are saying people will go to Turkey to have these excess skin folds removed. They say, oh, Turkey doesn't have the safeguards and assurances around drugs being used and the same quality and provenance as the UK. That's nonsense. I had my hair done in Turkey and it was great. I mean, there was a chicken running about in the quarter cabin. The surgeon was wearing Crocs and he was smoking a cigarette while he did it, but I look all right, I think.
Brilliant. Yeah.
He had his hair done. Not cut. You know what I mean? Cut. I don't think the audience is not going to know. No. I mean, this story is one of the funniest I've read because it said the rise of the slimming jabs would lead to people going to overseas for surgery, but it could lead to a million other effects. It could lead to women being so beautiful they don't need to travel overseas to find foreign men. That maybe the men in this country will find these women attractive.
You've basically just done an appeal to camera there, haven't you?
Well, I think
if you are looking for a gentleman, then do call.
Yeah, I would say, but I think, first of all, Leo's totally right, because this thing, nobody knows how this thing works. Actually, I've watched tons of videos on this. It's called Ozempic or Wegovy. There's lots.
Oh, they got weird names.
Weird
names.
And that's how
semaglitude.
Yeah, well, that's the name.
Sounds like a harvest festival.
Yeah, and it affects the glucagon. It has to do with the liver producing more insulin. It works for a time, and then it stops working.
And then it definitely turns your sperm crazy.
And it's going to be bad. It's going to be really, really bad. Eat meat.
Well,
you want to lose weight, you eat meat.
Before he starts that again, we will move on to, if you want to see meat, just look at his Twitter.
Yeah.
The Mail on Sunday, Lewis, and hippie crack, which sounds like the two edges of your glutes, but it's not. Tell us more about that.
Well, this is nitrous oxide. They call it hippie crack. I mean, it's been around for, I guess it was around when hippies were hippies. I mean, I'm now admitting to doing a drug. But people did knock it, and they do it now. You go to the park, and the whole place is filled with these canisters.
Yeah.
And it's a complete waste of metal, these tiny little canisters. They were for adding, whatchamacallit, in the whipped cream.
And they go in car tyres.
Yeah.
It's horrible. They're littered all over the roads. I think that's the reason to... I mean, at least when people smoke crack, they don't leave bits of metal lying around.
They leave little bits of plastic.
Maybe we can get these people onto actual crack. Be better for the environment.
Less littering.
At the end of the day, nitrous oxide is actually needed in the body. It affects our vasodilation. It's a very important element.
But the body can also make any nitrous oxide that it needs because it can't be gaining it from the atmosphere.
It can if it eats enough protein, which has nitrogen in it, and a lot of people are
therefore you don't need to breathe in nitrous oxide.
But if you do too much nitrous oxide, then it affects your nervous system. It's the same as people who do too much deep diving, like commercial divers. It kills your bones and kills your not the bends. That's when you come up too fast, but kills your bones and kills your nervous system.
Wow. It's not a step in the right direction at all, then, is it?
So we're gonna outlaw everything.
Sunday's Telegraph, Leo. Should people be subtitled for speaking only single Dutch?
So this is the Dutch Farmers' Party. Basically, they just had an election in the Netherlands, and it was amazing. This party came from nowhere because they've been so tough on farmers there. They've said they've got to reduce their nitrogen levels. It's not nitrous oxide, but nitrogen emissions have got to be cut by 50% by 2030, according to the EU. So they said to the farmers, we're going to just shut you down. You've got this compulsory purchase. These farms that have been there for like hundreds of years. So the farmers were understandably like, well, this is terrible. You're getting rid of these, great farms that, produce meat that Lewis likes to eat. Like, it's a terrible idea. So people really revolted against this and elected the BBB, which is the Farmers' Party. But they've got some strange requests. They're going to ask for conversations on television to not be subtitled. At the moment, apparently, if you're from the sort of countryside, you get subtitled because people in the cities have got no idea what these farmers are saying. It's like, hearing somebody from Cornwall or Scotland. So they're going to subtitle them.
But we do that over here, though, don't we? If an accent is thick from some part of the UK, I didn't realise it could be seen as offensive.
Yeah.
But
I didn't realise they had a countryside in the Netherlands. I was surprised to find out that the country isn't completely called Holland. That there is these places called Friesia and Limburger. It's I know it's a funny name.
So Holland is just part of the Netherlands, is that right?
Holland is there's an upper Holland, a lower Holland, a big Holland. There's two. Holland is just one part of it, and there's other little states around it, which where those funny little accents are.
This is because of your heritage, I suppose, because your American people tend to say, that's Scotland in England, and then they want to go to Leicester.
How is that blaming me as an American? How is that blaming Americans?
You're bewildered by this idea that there's one word that describes an area within another country. I don't think it's that shocking to us.
I think
this
is British people doing the same thing. They call it Holland.
No, never.
Yes,
never
they
happened.
do.
Never happened.
Tweet whether you've heard that. That's the whole country
Always
of the
call it
Netherlands.
Anyways,
respectful.
it's great to see.
I want an apology.
It's great to see democracy working and people rising up against these authoritarian, ridiculous strictures that the EU is putting on people. There's no way that 50% of Dutch farms should be shut down. These are some of the most productive, most efficient, well-run farms going back hundreds of years. So they really know what they're doing. To shut them down, and then they'll be like, oh no, it's fine. We'll just get the meat from Russia, like we said with gas, and look how that turned out.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
The Mail on Sunday, Lewis, and a story now about offensive opinions about women. And for more on this, we turn to our offensive opinion about women's correspondent,
Lewis Schaefer. Well, I am one of those kind of people. Some woman wrote a book that they said when the Women's Auxiliary Air Force was founded in 1939 during the war, or in the beginning days of the war, they didn't think that women could do a good job because they were hysterical. And it says the RAF chiefs initially feared women were too gossipy and prone to hysterics for vital military work in the Second World War. A new book reveals.
And more likely to cry as well.
Yeah, and of course, like one of these happy stories, and they were wrong because women are amazing. Women are amazing. They can do everything the man can do. But the question is, why year after year they do studies and they ask women, would you rather have a male boss or a female boss? And it's overwhelmingly male bosses because women are hysterical.
Quick survey. I'll put you off there. Quick survey then, Leo. Given a choice, if you had to have someone being your fighter pilot, would you pick a woman or Lewis?
Am I in the fighter pilot?
Yeah, you're allowed to sit in the back.
This is interesting because one of the things they say is that they thought women would be gossipy and reveal secrets to spies or whatever. But apparently, men reveal more secrets because it's easier to trick men through conceit or they're let down by their arrogance and their ego. But the thing about women crying, like women definitely cry more than men. I'm not like, any time I worked in an office, like women.
Maybe you, mate. If I cry.
No, but yeah, but like, but not just me. Like women cry more easily than men. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. And even people who start the hormones to become, their authentic selves, say, "Oh, I'm becoming more emotional. I'm more prone to crying." So it's a real thing. I'm not making it up.
aunt.
I think I might need to cut you off. We got
She was in Britain during World War II, serving in Oxford. So she was a hero, and you were right. I think most women could do a better job than me.
Coming up, why a teacher was fired for showing a picture of a statue, why a statue caused a fuss at a train station, and you might want to disable your AirTag.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Sunday Times now, Leo, and the tech firm Apple revolutionised phones, music, and now they're helping out the stalking community.
Yes, they are. So this is about the rise of the AirTag stalkers and how you can stop them. So they give an example. Basically, AirTags are these little discs that can be, they send a location to other Apple devices so you can track. If you put one in a suitcase or something and somebody nicks your suitcase, you can track that down. If you always want to be able to find your car keys, you can attach one of these fobs to your car keys, and then you can always find it. But some people are abusing that system to find out where their ex-wives are. I don't know why I smiled there, but Roberto Aparecido, oh man, some guy, his strange wife went on holiday to Brazil, so he put one of these tracking devices in her spare wheel, and he started showing up at events just unannounced. And she was like, how's he find him here? So then she got this app that scans your car, found this AirTag, and now he's going to jail, or he's been fined. No, I think he is. 125 hours of unpaid work. Doesn't say what the work is. I mean, if you enjoy your job, that's not really a punishment.
Lewis, this seems like the kind of thing where you think about doing this?
I think everybody does, but I'd have to be able to afford an iPhone. And you have to have an iPhone, and it's £35 for each one of these tags. So I'm thinking, is she worth it, really?
I think Huawei will bring out a £2 tag soon that you can get.
At the end of the day, it's the kind of thing that you can actually check for. They have this app that you can get. It's App Detect or something, or AirTag Detect. You can find out what's going on. And if they make it illegal to do it, then people won't do it. It's like setting up a camera in a toilet.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't really outlaw that. You can outlaw it, but you can't prevent it from happening. You just have to make it illegal.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, this article was very interesting because it was just mostly men who were doing this, which meant either one or two things: is they're really prejudicial against men, or number two, that women aren't as technologically oriented.
Or women are better at getting away with it. But tech's getting smaller and cheaper, and this sort of thing, hidden cameras, hidden recording devices are becoming really, really cheap and easy to hide. But the government is also doing it all the time. I mean, I'm less worried about ex-girlfriends than I am about the government.
Well, I think what they want to do is they want to make sure only the government has these techniques and the rest of us don't have it. My own mother stalked
Currently where? Because you know where she is?
She is dead. She stalked my father and would drive around looking for him, and then she saw him walking home and tried to run him over with the car, like literally tried to kill him. And then she realized it wasn't him.
So, the Mail on Sunday, Louis, and you can find out if a computer...
That's not even a joke. That's like a true story about my own family.
I mean, it wouldn't have happened if she'd have had those AirTags. Yeah. So, the Mail on Sunday, Louis, you can find out if a computer will replace you according to a computer.
Well, yeah, it says, according to the Daily Mail, will a robot take your job? Interactive tool reveals the risk you'll be replaced by a machine. It was by the École Polytechnique, of course you can pronounce this better than I am with your superior English education, Fédérale de Lausanne, recently developed an interactive tool, which basically, like you said, they had a machine figure out what jobs we're going to lose. And they said the jobs most at risk are slaughterers, meat packers, pressers, tile garment, and related materials, and Louis Schaefer on headliners. I could be replaced.
This is good. That means all these things are going to get cheaper because it's going to be done by a robot instead of a person. And robots are cheaper and they complain less, and they don't cry either.
And they do better jobs.
They do better jobs.
That's the main, like, for example, painting cars, the inside of cars, is humans did a good job, but they weren't as good as actually, it costs more money for a machine to paint the inside of a car.
As long as the people who don't have jobs, as long as they can afford to live, then this all gets sorted out.
They get repurposed in other more productive areas of the economy, so everybody benefits. That's why we've got a better standard of living now than when we were cavemen.
We'll have some of that.
They don't get repurposed. They just get put into a council
another
flat.
one now, Metro, Lewis. And my watch boasted it can work 50 metres underwater. And there's finally a map that means I could use it like that.
Well, this is the most interesting story. That's the least interesting. Is like, you know that about 10 to 24,000 years ago, during the late Paleolithic period, according to the Metro, there was a huge rise in water on the Earth. Of course, you know where this came from, do you not?
I'm not that old.
No, you don't, because nobody knows where the water comes from. But there was a sudden rise of water in the entire world, and it just happened to come when all the great societies were writing about giant floods, the Mayans,
we're right about that.
And the truth is that Immanuel Velikovsky.
Well, I'm going to have to move on. Well, there's a map that then tells you where those are. There we go, got to the end of it. The show's nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Sunday's front pages. The Sunday Mail, Rishi, I will let the victims say how to punish Yobs. Sunday Telegraph, European judges may be overruled on Rwanda deportations. Observer, top Tory MPs ask for £10,000 a day to work for fake company. The Sunday Express, Rishi crime blitz to woo red wall. The Sunday Times, strip searchers of children as young as 8. And finally, the Daily Star says the guy who works down the chip shop swears he's ET. Those are your front pages. That's all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests, Leo Kearse and Lewis Schaefer. Tune in tomorrow when Leo will be hosting In This Seat with Josh Howie and Scott Capurro will be on the panel. And remember, if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned. The Breakfast Show is on the way next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, fellow travellers. Lovely to have you with me. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on radio. It's a new Saturday lineup tonight. I'll be here for 1 hour instead of 2, but as Lao Tzu said, and it's only the first time I'll quote him this evening, the flame that burns twice as bright lasts half as long. Tonight I'll be joined by medical activist and Holocaust survivor Vera Sharaf to explore her motivations behind a new documentary series. We'll find out why local communities around the country are concerned about technology towers wiping out their wildlife and woodlands. And we'll hear how a metal detectorist from Warwickshire stumbled upon an intricate gold pendant associated with King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. All of that and more coming up, but first the news this evening with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Neil. Here's the latest. The Statistics Watchdog says the Prime Minister used incorrect figures when discussing the asylum claims backlog. The UK Statistics Authority has written to the government saying numbers used by Rishi Sunak do not reflect official stats. It's wrong, they say, to claim the Conservatives have halved the number of people waiting for their asylum application to be processed, when the backlog has increased by 150,000 since they took office. Bus drivers in the West Midlands have ended their indefinite strike after accepting a pay offer. Members of Unite, employed by National Express in the West Midlands, began their walkout on Monday. The offer, which was accepted by more than 3,100 drivers, includes a one-year 16.2% pay increase. In south-east London, cars, residents and tractors have been lining the roads to protest at the expansion of the ultra-low emissions zone. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's proposal would expand the congestion zone to cover the whole of the city. Transport for London claims that 9 out of 10 cars driving in outer London meet the ULEZ standards, so will not be liable for the charge. However, the RAC says 700,000 drivers will face a daily fee of £12.50. 2 teenage boys have been charged with the murder of a 16-year-old boy who was stabbed to death in Northampton. Rohan Shand, known as Fred, died following the attack on Wednesday afternoon. The 14 and 16-year-old boys, who can't be named for legal reasons, appeared before Northampton Magistrates Court this morning. They've been remanded in custody. The Mayor of Greater Manchester has been ordered to pay a speeding fine of almost £2,000 after being caught driving 38 miles per hour above the speed limit. In a statement, Andy Burnham says he had to reroute when he realised his junction was closed, but he was not aware of any variable speed limit in place, he says. He was reportedly driving 78 miles an hour in a 40 zone. The Mayor says he was going too fast and accepts the court's decision. At least 23 people have been killed after a major tornado hit the US state of Mississippi. It's understood that dozens have been injured and at least 4 people are still missing after the twister swept through the state and on into Alabama. The Emergency Management Agency says the storm has left a trail of damage more than 100 miles long. Residents have spoken of entire buildings left in rubble, cars turned over and trees uprooted.
We had to get ourselves into the middle part of the house, and we did, and we got in there, and obviously it was coming right behind us because as soon as we got in there, we heard a big boom and didn't hear anything else for a little while, so we walked out and then just came out to about 10 trees down in our yard.
Russia wants to station nuclear weapons in Belarus, according to Russian state media. President Putin says he's struck a deal to post tactical nuclear artillery within the country which borders Ukraine. He claims it's not a violation of nuclear non-proliferation agreements, comparing it with the United States stationing nuclear weapons on the territory of European allies. Pope Francis has updated rules dealing with sexual abuse in the Catholic Church to accept that both children and adults can be victims. The original decree only covered sexual acts targeting minors and vulnerable people. The new rules now require lay people in charge of Vatican-sanctioned organisations to report any suspicions they have of abuse. The changes come after critics accused Pope Francis of being reluctant to defrock abusive priests. And Gwyneth Paltrow has testified that she initially thought she was being sexually assaulted after a collision with a retired doctor on a ski slope in Utah in 2016. 76-year-old Terry Sanderson is accusing the Oscar-winning actress of crashing into him and says he's living with a permanent traumatic brain injury as a result. He's suing for damages worth £250,000. Ms Paltrow denies the allegations and she claims Mr Sanderson collided with her.
I was skiing and 2 skis came between my skis, forcing my legs apart, and then there was a body pressing against me, and there was a very strange grunting noise. So my brain was trying to make sense of what was happening. I thought, is this a practical joke? Is someone like doing something perverted? This is really, really strange.
We're on TV, online, DAB+ radio, and of course on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Back now to Neil.
Who watches the watchers? Who guards the guards? The question was posed by the Roman satirist Juvenal 2,000 years ago, but it has never been more relevant. It's applied now to remind us of the need to keep a watchful eye on those in power. This should be our paramount concern now when lies and liars are everywhere. This week, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the House of Commons Privileges Committee he had not lied when he told the House that his own COVID guidance was being followed in number 10. Note the word guidance, made especially interesting by the fact ordinary members of the public were, as I seem to recall, arrested, charged and fined for sitting together on park benches or on the beach. I'm not sure that's how guidance normally works. In any event, I honestly don't care whether he lied or not to Parliament. I don't care if they were having cake or coke. This is a red herring, a sleight of hand, a tactic to distract the gullible. The point that must neither be overlooked nor forgotten is that neither Johnson nor anyone else at those gatherings was demonstrably afraid of COVID. We know that because we've seen the photos of them standing together without masks. Standing apart and wearing masks was for the little people. We might also assume that we were being laughed at by those who knew there was nothing to fear and therefore no reason not to party. Keir Starmer's Labour Party was the same. We saw those pictures too. He and they called for earlier, longer, harder lockdowns and all the rest, and then met for curry and beer and cosy chats. Fear was for the little people, and so left and right, blue and red, and all positions and team colours in between laughed up their sleeves as the nudge units and the paid propagandists told us anyone breaching the regulations, guidance, was a granny-killing COVIDiot and pandemic denier. Look me in the eye and tell me it wasn't so. So who guards the guards? Who watches the watchers? Let's notice, among much else, that this is the Commons sitting in judgment on the Commons, which is to say politicians sitting in judgment on politicians. This is the guards judging the guards. This is the same Commons whose inhabitants worked together in unquestioning lockstep to impose policies that ruined lives, wrecked livelihoods and upended the economy. This is the same Commons that, far from accepting responsibility for the carnage, is actively seeking to have us look the other way while they get about the business of doing nothing more than playing politics, all they're fit for, fiddling while Rome burns. This is the same Commons that empties when one of their own stands to speak up on behalf of people killed or harmed by medical products pushed as vaccines. And trust me, I'll get back to that safe and effective nonsense they pushed in a moment. We never quite got to mandated jabs for all, but people all over the world were sacked for opting to live by the ideal of my body, my choice, the notion enshrined in the Nuremberg Code that states that a person should at all times have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching or other form of constraint or coercion. We didn't quite get to mandates for the jabs for the general population, but I say it was a damned close-run thing. I say they were itching to mandate the vaccines. I say mandates weren't pushed across the line in the end because enough of us made plain it would mean civil disobedience, if not full-on civil war. I maintain that while they've gone quiet about lockdowns and face masks, it can only be a matter of time before that playbook is brought out for the next crisis they can cook up. More and more are queuing up to distance themselves from the harms done during the last 3 years, while still priapic on account of all that unbridled power over the everyday lives of the tax-paying public. Who watches the watchers? Who guards the guards? There are calls for a war crimes trial for Putin. What about a war crimes trial for Tony Blair while we're at it? We hit the 20th anniversary of his unlawful war in Iraq last week. That unlawful war that led to over 1 million deaths, that destabilised the entire region to this day and gave birth to ISIS. Wouldn't the moral way to mark that birthday be a war crimes trial for all the people who took us there? And while we're considering war crimes trials, shouldn't we look again at precisely what successive United States administrations did in Korea, in Vietnam, and more recently in Libya, and in Syria, and in Afghanistan, and other sovereign nation states, too numerous to mention? Shouldn't we look at what was done and by whom? US libertarian think tank the Cato Institute recently looked again at the behaviour of successive US presidents in relation to the Saudi Arabian horror show in Yemen. They reported and suggested the appropriateness of war crimes trials for Barack Obama, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, quote, whose administrations serviced the US-provided warplanes, supplied munitions used to bomb weddings, funerals, school buses and other civilian targets, gave intelligence used for targeting and for a time refuelled Saudi and Emirati aircraft. US officials could not claim to be surprised at their culpability, they added. The State Department warned that they could be held responsible for war crimes. Also, George W. Bush is another good candidate for a trial on his aggressive, unjustified attack on Iraq, based on manipulated and fabricated intelligence. His war ended up killing hundreds of thousands of civilians, as well as triggering years more of conflict. Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, today spending his golden years profiting after acting as Bush's poodle, would be an appropriate co-conspirator, end quote. Who watches the watchers? Who guards the guards? We're trained to fear global warming, the warming of the planet, while that world burns still on account of the fire Tony Blair helped light in the Middle East with UK taxpayer-funded missiles and bombs. Who watches the watchers? Who guards the guards? Let's look again at the banks and the simmering chaos there, in that world in which banks are secretive, privately owned businesses, in which central banks have the power to create money out of thin air and lend the same sums over and over and over again while growing fatter and fatter on more and more interest and debt. Another former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, traded on and perpetuated a myth of being a safe pair of hands when it came to money matters. This is the same Gordon Brown who sold off half of the UK's gold reserves at a knockdown price so low it was remembered ever after as the Brown Bottom, and one of the worst deals in recorded history. In 2008, Brown bailed out the banks with billions and billions of pounds worth of our money, and those banks duly stayed open. The bankers kept getting their bonuses, and nothing changed when it came to stopping their reckless games with fantasy money. We were sold down the river, and now the banks are shaking on their fantasy foundations once again, and for more of the same reasons. Who watches the watchers? Who guards the guards? The MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, is supposed to monitor the information we get about health and the safety and effectiveness of the drugs we are offered. But the MHRA gets 86% of its funding from the pharmaceuticals industry. Is that the recipe for unbiased behaviour, always and only in the interests of the people? I'm only asking. It's the same the world over. 65% of the US Federal Drugs Administration comes from Big Pharma. Between 2006 and 2019, 9 out of 10 FDA commissioners went on to secure jobs with pharmaceutical companies. 89% of the European Medicines Agency funding comes from Big Pharma. 96% of the funding for the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia comes from Big Pharma. In Japan, the relevant agency gets 85% of its funding from Big Pharma. No less a publication than the British Medical Journal asked in a headline over a recent article, "From FDA to MHRA, are drug regulators for hire?" Obviously, I couldn't possibly say one way or the other. A recent report from Australia's TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, equivalent to our MHRA, a report made available only by a Freedom of Information request, makes plain that in January 2021 it was known to anyone privy to Pfizer's own data that the lipid nanoparticle was widely distributed all around the human body. All of this was known before the so-called vaccines were approved for injection into billions of human beings, from babies up. Those entrusted with our healthcare knew in advance that the tiny oily bubbles carrying the making of the toxic spike protein could and would go to brains, hearts, livers, ovaries, testes, everywhere. And they went right ahead and did it anyway. Safe and effective, they said, over and over and over. Misinformation, anyone? If they were doing their jobs and they're reading reports like this, then Chris Whitty would have known, Patrick Vallance would have known, Anthony Fauci would have known. This information is out there now in the public domain, though heavily redacted, and God alone knows what remains redacted. And so why isn't this front page and main TV news all around the world? Why not? Who watches the watchers? Who guards the guards? The answer is as stark as it is depressing. Westminster awards itself the power to make laws, enforce those laws, and decree the punishment for any transgressions of those laws. This is a textbook definition of the tyranny that our Constitution, enshrined in Magna Carta 1215, was specifically shaped to prevent. And yet here we are, with the watchers watching the watchers, the guards guarding the guards. It's as obvious as Boris Johnson's estrangement from the truth that this tyranny should never have been allowed to evolve, and that since it has, we must not tolerate it a moment longer. Decisions of importance must be made by those with skin in the game, but with no means to profit either directly or indirectly from the decisions they come to. Who guards the guards is a 2,000-year-old question. Older by 500 years is the Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way, by Lao Tse, the old master. Last week, a friend reminded me of words that sound as though they might have been written this morning. When rich speculators prosper while farmers lose their land, when government officials spend money on weapons instead of cures, when the upper class is extravagant and irresponsible while the poor have nowhere to turn, all this is robbery and chaos. Robbery and chaos. That's what our leaders and their little wizards have inflicted upon us. It was true 2,500 years ago, and it's still true now. That old book also warns us about those who try to control, who use force to protect their power. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have far too much. This is how we will beat them, how we will win, by remembering what our ancestors learned long ago and finally doing something about it. Here's the thing. It's long past time to watch the guards. What we need all over the West, and once and for all, is a changing of the guards. Daniel Moylan, what do you make? Who guards the guards? Who watches the watchers?
Well, Neil, one thing I disagree with you about in that is that you're having a trial of Boris Johnson at the moment, you can call it a trial, being carried out by politicians, and you object to that. But those politicians are elected and accountable. There's an election coming, not very long away, we don't know when. There's an election coming and people can pass judgment on that. We live in a democracy, it's not a tyranny. And I would rather have decisions made by people who are elected than by any alternative. I can't think of a better alternative. So actually the answer to the question is that the public, the electorate, do watch the guards. They do get their say. They do choose the people who actually form, especially in our system, who form their government. And they do have, most importantly in our system, the chance to kick them out.
But they're in a position they're in a position to shape the questions they want to ask and to frame the nature of the trial as you describe it. I would contend that what they have chosen to focus on, whether or not Boris Johnson told the truth to Parliament about what was happening in Number 10, is a secondary issue. When the glaring fact is that they were demonstrably not afraid of COVID, and we can tell that from their behaviour, and they do not address that, far less take responsibility for it.
Well, you say they weren't afraid of COVID from the handful of a couple of snaps, OK? Boris Johnson spent, how long was it, a week, 10 days? I can't remember. Nearly dying from COVID, and he learned his lesson. Then other people learnt their lesson as well. There were a lot of people in Number 10 who were afraid of COVID, and I wouldn't, frankly, go too far on the basis of those snaps. The truth is that I'd rather have politicians making this judgment than anybody else. If you say that the question whether Boris misled Parliament knowingly or recklessly, whatever the right term is, if you want to say that's a secondary issue, I couldn't agree with you more about that. If you want to say that there should be a proper inquiry into the whole COVID pandemic and how it was handled, as far as I know, there is going to be one, but I agree with you, there should be. Those are the big issues. This is a secondary issue. But nonetheless, the fact is, having it done by elected politicians, having them those accountable people in charge, is the heart of our democracy. And you're completely wrong, I think, to use the word tyranny as you did.
Am I completely wrong, Ingrid?
No.
Should politicians judge politicians?
Yes, absolutely they should. And I cannot agree with you here at all, Daniel. First of all, let me say that actually Boris Johnson wasn't really properly elected. He took the votes and it was agreed with Nigel Farage. They would take the votes and that's how he got in. He would not have got in on his own merits.
There was no agreement with Nigel Farage. There was no Conservative standing down in favour of Farage.
Back though, if I can interrupt both of you, in what?
Okay, well,
the context in which that investigation.
There was no agreement. He decided unilaterally not.
Oh, well, all I'm saying that it wasn't really a completely democratic. We didn't really want. No, because we didn't really want Boris. He didn't have enough votes to get in.
Ingrid, what about the context in which this so-called investigation has been framed? Are you satisfied that they are seriously looking into what matters to the people of Britain?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. But can I just go back a little bit to put something still into context? Because at the very beginning of this, Boris Johnson believed in herd immunity, and that was the direction that we were going. And then it all changed, and then there was a whole lockdown and whatever. So that was a change of mind. I would have been very happy for him to carry on with his original idea to go along with the herd immunity. Then he gets it, I don't know. But yes, we do need the change of guards. That's what you said. I absolutely do agree we need to change guards. I think it's got stale. I don't think the people that are watching the people are actually sort of like doing the job properly. I think they've closed ranks a little bit. I think sort of they're worried about with the elections coming up, you know, currying favour. I don't like it. It's smelly, it stinks as far as I'm concerned.
Got to keep moving this week like no other. I'm working against 1 hour rather than 2. I've got to get to the first of my breaks, after which we'll hear why local communities all around the country are fearing for their wildlife and the rest at the hands of technology. See you in 3 minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Now, depending on where you find the relevant information, there may be more than 7 million closed-circuit television cameras in the UK. That, if it's correct, would mean 1 for every 11 people. There's no legal need as such to register CCTV cameras, so there are only guesstimates available. There may be nearly 1 million CCTV cameras in London alone, with the average punter captured on screen 70 times a day. One way or another, the intensity of this surveillance of our every move is set